C, code in C. Ruby's for beginners, code in C. Little sound check there. This song got me in trouble at Microsoft. Oompa loompa doopity doo. I would wait for Service Pack 2. If you don't, your screen might turn blue. Oompa loompa. Service Pack 2. And now the main presentation. One more song. A little more on topic. I was gonna get a job, but then came AI. I'm now an unemployed slob because of AI. I'm hiding from Terminators, yeah, you know why. Yeah, hey, 'cause of AI, 'cause of AI, 'cause of AI. All right. All right, now the presentation. Anyways, today's presentation is, let me bump up the screen here, is entirely on a Jupyter notebook. And you can get your hands on this Jupyter notebook, at this URL right here, globalnerdy.com/civo-nav/local-rag. Anyways, my name is Joey DeVilla. I am the Supreme Developer Relations Person at Unified.to. It's basically an API of APIs. We integrate with 160 APIs, but you only have to talk to us and you never have to integrate with Salesforce again. That alone is worth it. So anyways, what I'm here to talk about today is retrieval augmented generation, or RAG for short. And it's an AI technique that combines two things. The first thing, of course, is a machine learning model, typically an LLM. And secondly, it provides a mechanism for retrieving additional information to supplement the LLM to produce better answers. Now, your first question probably is, look, it's 11:15 to 11:30 right now. This is my dumbest time of the day. I don't want anything terribly difficult and technical. Can you make this thing as simple as possible? And I will. And I will explain it using Star Wars characters. Let me just scale things down here a little. Okay. Large language models without retrieval augmented generation are kind of like this. Luke Skywalker asks C-3PO, who is our LLM, who built you? And C-3PO goes, I know, I suppose Princess Leia did, or maybe one of her mechanics. Those of you who have watched Star Wars know that this is categorically not true, but 3PO doesn't know this, so 3PO does what an LLM does, which is hallucinate, make up some kind of thing that sounds very likely, because that's what LLMs do. They are basically autocomplete on steroids. Now, LLMs with RAG do a slightly different thing, where there is a bit of an intermediary between the LLM and the user. And that intermediary, of course, is some source of external data or computation, combined with the user's own question, gets augmented through an augmentation system represented by Obi-Wan Kenobi there. Then the message gets sent to the LLM, and the LLM produces a more accurate, if somewhat disturbing, answer. Now, the problems that retrieval augmented generation solves are primarily two things: hallucinations, represented by Jar Jar Binks, and of course, out-of-date info. So the idea basically is, let's bring the LLM up to date and let's provide it with a little more information so that its answers are more accurate or up to date. Now, retrieval augmented generation was created by this guy. Now, make a note of this. Patrick Lewis, he's part of the team who wrote a 2020 paper called, and I link to it here, and if you download the Jupyter Notebook, you can read it yourself if you're really good at reading academic papers. Warning, there will be math. Anyways, the paper's called Retrieval Augmented Generation for Knowledge-Intensive NLP Tasks, and it is basically the standard paper right now for how RAG should work. And what I'm going to do is, rather than drown you in math, I'm going to very quickly explain the underlying principles behind RAG. The first step is to take the external source of documents, the external the external source of knowledge, and convert it to a standardized text representation. Makes absolute sense. This is basically data cleaning. The next thing that happens is chunking. We take those documents and break them into equal-sized pieces, or, as we say in computer science, chunks. We then take those chunks and perform the embedding process, where we take those chunks of text and turn them into vector representations. For those of you who did not take math, a vector, basically, for the intents and purposes of computer science, is a large array of numbers. Typically, for converting text to some kind of vector, we're basically converting it into an array of about a few thousand numbers, all between the value of 0 and 1, because as far as anybody is concerned in math, there are only two numbers, 0 and 1, and everything in between, and that's it. That entire process, the cleaning, the chunking, the embedding, is a process called indexing. And if we go back to Star Wars now, this is a closer representation of how RAG works, where basically what we do is we take the user's prompt and we convert that into a vector. And we run a similarity search on our store of vectors from our external data, and we look for the most similar results between the top finds in our vector store and the user's own prompt. And then we combine that and feed that to the LLM, and then we get, the LLM typically presents a more accurate answer and provides up-to-date info. So what I'm going to do really quickly is, this is the live code part of the exercise. So this is all Python running in a Jupyter notebook. I'm going to very quickly run this thing, which lets me create an LLM object. And I'm using a tool called LangChain. LangChain is a fantastic tool. It basically makes working with LLMs a lot easier. And it is fantastic for isolating you from an LLM. So in other words, I can switch the underlying LLM and still talk to it using the same API. So currently I'm using OpenAI, but I can switch it out with something from Hugging Face or any, who knows what other LLMs are out there. This thing, LangChain, interfaces with dozens of LLMs. So I'm gonna very quickly create a LangChain wrapper around an OpenAI LLM and ask it a question: whose fault is the AI term RAG? Patrick Lewis regrets the creation of the term RAG. He goes, I wish I'd come up with something better. And OpenAI's output right now is there is no specific group or individual who's to blame. That is not true, but we will fix that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a prompt object. This is going to be a simple prompt object right here. I'm basically telling OpenAI, look, I'm giving it two prompts, basically a system prompt and a user prompt. The user prompt is the user input. The system prompt is basically instructions to the OpenAI to tell it how to act, and we're saying, you are an English to Spanish translator. Translate whatever I input. So I've created that prompt. I'm going to run it now, and I'm going to have it translate this sentence. I'm enjoying this presentation and will tell all my friends about it. Soy disfrutando, et cetera, et cetera. So that is correct. That's working. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do some RAG stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load a web page by NVIDIA which mentions who wrote the original paper on retrieval augmented generation, and I'm also just printing out whatever the document text I fetched. So this is the text inside that web page. I just printed it out to confirm that we actually loaded the page. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a store of word vectors for that page. So I'm going to run that right now. This is where we go through the entire process of indexing that page and converting its contents into vectors. Those vectors we're going to use to compare against the user's input. We're going to find a close match and feed both to the LLM. So I'm creating a chain right now which is going to retrieve all this information and work it together, and it is time for us to test it now. Once again, I am going to ask OpenAI, whose fault is the term RAG? Let's hope this works. What do we got here? Last time it said there's no way of knowing. This time, because it's been fed the information, it says Patrick Lewis. Okay, I've got one more minute here. I'm going to go very quickly here and I'm going to ask it. I'm going to ask the same retrieval chain, who's the CEO of Microsoft? And it's going to go, yes, the CEO of Microsoft is Satya Nadella. Actually, that was not expected. What it was supposed to do is go, I don't know. And then I was going to expand it by saying, I was going to expand the parameters and say, look, this time use the retrieved data and use your own data. And I'm going to run it again. And this time, when I run, who is the CEO of Microsoft, it says, I do not have the ability, it's weird. It's actually gone backwards from what I expected. But note that you can, with RAG, limit the search to only the document you pointed to, or use a mix of its own information plus the documents you pointed to. And anyways, that is my talk, and here are my QR codes, and if there are any questions, fire away.